especially during this time, during this terrible time of war, how can we turn to the Blessed Mother and to the power of fasting to end the conflicts of our time?
Yes, Our Lady has told us in many apparitions throughout the world that prayer and fasting can stop wars. She's told us the power of the Rosary. In some of the exorcisms that we've heard from the exorcists that we know, Our Lady is very powerful. When she shows up in exorcisms, the demons have to leave. And what we're learning is that when we pray the Holy Rosary, especially we're praying in a state of grace with the right, attitude, and the more we pray with people, the Rosary is like an exorcism prayer. And the more we can get people all around the country praying, the evil spirits that are trying to possibly foment war, foment violence, etc., eventually, if there's so many people praying, they are prevented, they're paralyzed from doing the work that they've been asked to do. So I remember hearing that years ago, and I've read it in many places since. And that stuck with me about the power of confraternity, the arch confraternity of the Rosary, and gathering so many people praying. And Our Lady has said that when we pray as individuals, that's good. But like when I pray with my husband, that's on a better level. When I pray with my family, that's on another level of power. When I pray with our prayer group, which I'm going to be going to our prayer group tomorrow, we'll be praying. That's on another level. And then as a parish, powerful. And then when we join forces with everyone around the world, and Pope Francis called for a day of prayer and fasting this Friday, October 27th, which is during the week of prayer and fasting, which started October 20th to the 28th. We thought, oh, this is beautiful. Thank you so much, because now our church is coming together. How powerful. So I think we're going to see some powerful things happen, and mitigation. And, God intervenes when there's enough prayer, with enough fasting. He will have mercy on us. So that's what we are praying for, mercy on the world, praying for both sides. The Pope said, don't take sides. Pray for both. Right now, the current situation in the Mideast, pray for both of them, because really, war tears apart families. It tears about people. And it's not a good way to resolve things. And he really just asked everyone throughout the world to pray and fast. So we thank him for calling upon all of us, and we encourage everyone out there that fasting can stop wars. And a great example, Queen Esther is one of my favorites. And in the Old Testament, and this is Maureen's version, Queen Esther was a very beautiful queen, and she was, married to the king. And at the time, there was a bad guy, I call him the bad guy, Haman, who was planning to kill the Israelites. And he wanted to go after particularly Esther's uncle, Mordecai. And so when Esther realized the plan that they were having to kill the Israelites, she went into a 3-day fast, and she got many people with her to fast. And after 3 days and 3 nights of fasting, she went before the king. She appealed to him. And back then that was not a good thing to do, because she could have lost her life. And when he realized what was happening, the king, the gallows that Haman prepared for Mordecai, the king had Haman hung from the gallows, and his 10 sons were killed. And so the Israelites were freed. They won the battle. So a boomerang. So what was meant for evil, boomeranged on evil. And Our Lady's like the new Esther. So when she appeared at Fatima, she had the star at the bottom of her gown, and that is the Star of Esther. And so she's, I believe, interceding before our King of the universe, Jesus. And she's interceding for our whole world, that we are protected, that this war would end. And I think that's why it's important to do the prayer, the Rosary. Holy Mass is the most powerful prayer, adoration, and then fasting, sacrifice, some kind of penance, because the two together are very powerful. One is good, the other's good, but together it's like a big, on a spiritual level, a spiritual atomic weapon that goes off, meaning the graces all over. And so we encourage people this week to do this prayer and fasting and join, especially with what our Holy Father has asked for, on Friday. So there's many other stories that we can talk about.
So can you just tell me how you've personally witnessed the power of fasting in
Well,
your
I have
life?
a nice story to tell that something happened to me years ago when I started on this. So years ago, I was very involved with the Crisis Pregnancy Center, and I learned about the power of fasting and prayer together. And so I decided, of course, back then I was a lot younger, I did a 9-day fast on bread and water. Looking back, through the grace of God, but I was a lot younger. And I remember at the time looking at this wall, and I had this woman who was promoting abortion on the wall, and I was praying. We were praying for her, not just me, many people that worked with us. It was a volunteer place. And then there was another woman who headed up an abortion clinic. This is a really cool story. So many of us would see their pictures, and we said, we're going to pray and fast. Well, on the 9th day of the fast, we got a knock on the Crisis Pregnancy Center door. And I happened to open it, which back then I usually didn't, but I did. And there was that woman standing before me who was promoting abortions throughout the area. She was giving out the pill to a lot of the women. And I was like, sort of shocked. But because I was fasting, I was very mellow, which was the grace of God, because I couldn't believe she was standing right before me. And I'll never forget her eyes. Her eyes were very dark. And I remember thinking, oh, this poor woman. And so I invited her in. We sat down in one of the centers, like little, living room centers, and we talked. And we talked about pro-life. Let's call her name. Her name was Susan, but that wasn't her real name. I said, Susan, do you understand the kids today want to hear that they can live a chaste life? They want to know that they can have a good family. They want to know that they can have children. They don't need these services. They don't really want to have abortions. And why are you promoting all this? And we just had this conversation. In the back room, there are all these volunteers praying the rosary for us. And so I don't know if anything got through to her, but about a year later, the other woman we were praying for, she ended up converting to the Catholic faith. And she started this center for people to get out of the abortion industry, similar to what Abby Johnson's now doing. Mm-hmm. And this was years ago. This was in the 80s. And so I look back at that time period, and that was my first beginning of seeing the power of prayer and fasting. The evil came right to us, but we got to talk. And the other lady we were praying for converted a year later. So there's a ton of other stories like that, but that was one of my big ones that happened to me personally that gave me great hope that prayer and fasting are the weapons today, the tools that the church has given us to purify the hearts of people, to purify our hearts and to purify the hearts of others.
So do you think we should always be fasting especially if we're appealing to God for a specific intention?
Well, that's a really good question. So there are different apparitions that are occurring where Our Lady has asked for bread and water fast on Fridays. And because the world needs it, she says that the fasting is not as adequate in the church as it used to be. And if we can, on Wednesdays. And so I know a lot of people on Fridays try to abstain from meat. And many of the people I know will maybe do one meal a day. They try to do some kind of a fast. And I do think there's something to that, because today there's so much violence. There's just the breakdown of the family. I mean, we know all the problems. And so how much more do we need to use what the church has told us, the power of the rosary, the power of adoration, the power of Holy Mass? And so I do think today it would be good for us to all be involved in some kind of penance, some kind of fasting on a consistent basis as we can, according to our walk of life. And that will help to contribute to, Our Lady talks about that there's the triumph of her Immaculate Heart that is coming at some point. She doesn't tell us when, but we need to hasten the victory. And so I know a lot more people compared to years ago that are very involved now in going to Mass more frequently, going to adoration. Adoration seems to have exploded all around the country, which I think is wonderful. The bishops have come together for the Eucharistic revival, which I think is an answer to prayer. And next year they're expecting 80,000 people in Indianapolis. And one of our presenters at the Basilica this weekend, Ray Grijalbas, is doing a beautiful movie on Eucharistic miracles. He just turned 30. He's amazing. And, you know, God put him in with this Hollywood director who actually called Ray and said, hey, what if we do a movie together on Eucharistic miracles? And we're going to show the trailer live streamed this Saturday, October 28th, at the Basilica. And it's a beautiful movie, and it shows some of these Eucharistic miracles and what happens, and it's like mind-blowing. It's going to touch a lot of hearts, I believe, and convert many souls and bring a lot of people back to the church. So we're living in exciting times, even though, of course, we see the evil out there, but the explosion of the wonderful good news, the supernatural, the signs and wonders is happening before our eyes. So we're seeing the battle between Christ and his kingdom, Our Lady, the angels, you know, all of her people. And then you see Satan and his forces and the violence and the hatreds. But you know what? We know who wins in the end.
So why do you think, or do you think that in this call for prayer and fasting, we should really also focus on Our Lady and the Eucharist and praying the Rosary? Can you just comment on that and what you think about that?
Absolutely. So I had a wonderful conversation with Bishop Robert Baker, and he was telling me, this ties in, it's called Our Lady of Joyful Hope. And I had never heard of that. And when he was Bishop of Charleston, someone commissioned this icon called Our Lady of Joyful Hope. And he actually sent a picture, and Our Lady they had a statue made. She's standing with one hand to the rosary. The other hand, she has the child Jesus, and he's holding the chalice and the host. And I went, oh my gosh, I love that. So he was saying, this is what she's showing us, the power of the two pillars that John Bosco saw that would help the church in the latter times, the vision he had of 1862, the two pillars, the Eucharist and the Blessed Mother, that the two pillars, you know, the Eucharist and Our Lady, they would help the church in these tumultuous times. And so when he showed the pictures to me through the phone, of course, he sent me the pictures of Our Lady of Joyful Hope, I was like, this is great. He said, this is all about joy, hope, and healing, and the power of the Rosary and the power of the Eucharist. And he said, that's what's going to get us through these times. That's what's going to give us the hope. That's what's going to give us the joy. That's what's going to give us the healing. And I said to him, I see it happening already. It's so exciting. I said, I didn't know there was a statue that I want to get it. But he is just a wonderful shepherd, and he's filled with hope. And he's the one that goes to the March for Life every year. And he brought the Chinoculo community here from overseas. There's like 75 Chinoculos throughout the world, and they work with the drug addicts. And they have prayer and fasting as part of their program. They have praying the Rosary. You know, they teach them the vocations. They teach them, you know, to use their gifts. And from what I've heard, it's like the best program in the world. Well, hello, it's based on the spiritual. And so he's very involved in that, and he brought it to St. Augustine, the Chinoculo community. So I'm just great. I think it's just great to know that heaven has given us all these treasures. We have all we need. We just need to pick them up and do it. We need to use it as the old, I forget which sports group says, just do it. We just need to pray. We need to fast. And guess what? We're going to see miracles.
So is there anything else you would add to, you know, how fasting fuels prayer that you want people to know about?
I know fasting is difficult. So people say to me, well, it's too difficult. And I said, no pain, no gain. I said, do you really want to break through this stronghold in your life? Or do you want to really see some miracles in the world? And they go, yes. Well, then we have to offer something up. We have to, it's going to be difficult, but as you get through it, when you're fasting, at least for me, it's hard. It's like, oh, I think I want that. No, you don't need it right now. It helps you to discipline yourself. And then it makes you want to pray more. Okay, well, have I prayed the second rosary that I really should be praying? Did I pray the Divine Mercy today? And then it helps you to stay more in a state of otherworldliness, and I definitely think it adds a whole nother dimension to the prayer. And one of the models for me was the Curé of Ars. We visited his place years ago on pilgrimage to France. And I remember seeing the podium that he used to preach from. We saw his incorrupt body. And he constantly was fasting for his town. And he would have bouts with the devil. And I remember reading about this. And then when I went to Ars, I saw this bed that was burnt. I went, wait a second. Is that the burnt bed that the devil lit on fire when he was fasting? And I don't know if they probably, just had something that looked like it. But the point was, whenever he fasted for somebody for the conversion of a soul, the devil was furious. But when he did that, that person converted. So it shows you, and he's the model of the parish priest, shows you the power of prayer with fasting. And a lot of the saints fasted and prayed. Many of the saints did. And then in the, Jonah, we just read the book of Jonah a couple of weeks ago at Mass. He went throughout the city telling everybody to fast. They did. And then, God relented. And then Jonah was a little perturbed because guess what? They didn't get the annihilation, thank God. But he was perturbed, I guess, that or whatever, he probably got attacked. Okay. But the point is, it worked. He went throughout the city, said to pray and fast, and they did. So there's just a lot of wonderful stories in the Old Testament. The Lord fasted 40 days for us to show us. And the great Saint John Paul II said, Jesus himself has shown us by his own example that prayer and fasting are the first and most effective weapons against the forces of evil. And that was in Evangelium Vitae. And that says it all. If we want to see this evil go, we all have to take this seriously for the sake of our families, our children, and our children's children. We're fighting for the future. And Our Lady needs us to collaborate with her plan to bring peace to the world. So it works. It's powerful.
So what would you tell people who have a hard time with fasting, who maybe can't do it because of health problems? What should they do?
Sure. And there are people that can't because they're on certain medications. I would encourage them. There's some kind of sacrifice they can make. Maybe they have these favorite TV shows, so maybe they can decide, all right, this particular week, I'm not going to watch these shows that I like, and I'm going to pray the rosary instead. There's different, acts that you can do. Maybe they say to themselves, you know what? I can go to Mass more often instead of just Sundays. I'm going to try to go to Mass, more often. Maybe they start praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Maybe they do a deed of mercy for a neighbor who's down the street, who's living by herself, and no one really visits her, and they decide, you know what? I need to, bring some little bread down to her and have a cup of tea with her. So there's things, as you pray, the Lord will show you what you can do. There's always more that we can do in our life, to lead us to personal holiness and to lead us closer to the Lord.